Oh yeah, everybody. How are we doing tonight? Good, me too. Thank you. So, I'm going to tell you the story of a magical object that is used for several types of reanimation, and even more so, it itself is a tale that has been reanimated throughout history up to and including the present day. So, several years back, I had the distinct honor of illustrating a nonfiction work about the occult called Effigy of Graven Image and Holy Idol. And in the course of such, I had to do actually a lot of my own research because I wasn't given the manuscript to read. So I'm asked to illustrate all these magical objects, but I have a research problem, so I delved into them. And the magic objects and rituals and all that span a great deal of time and space. There were things from ancient Babylon to early modern era England. And so regardless if you believe in magic or not, that's not the issue here. We do know that these magical objects, or objects purported to be magical, did actually exist. So before I delve into the Hand of Glory, I'm going to go through and show you some magical artifacts that I illustrated for the book. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information behind each. And at the end, I'm going to ask you if you can guess the common thread that unites all of them, other than the obvious, like they're magic, they're objects. And if you know the answer already, don't spoil it, Trey. No spoilers, okay? So here we have a cinerary urn, thought to be late Byzantine because of the more polished and detailed representation of traditional grave iconography from the Mediterranean region, as well as we see the Gorgon face from Greek mythology. Here we have a medieval Islamic ceramic vessel. Witchcraft in that culture was expressly forbidden, but we still found objects like this that were meant to invoke spirits or jinn. Here we have 3 witch poppets. They were discovered in 1906 cased in a house in Chelmsford, England in the 17th century. And based on the symbolism of their elements, we can see that they are, top left is fertility, top right is love binding, and the bottom one is death or debilitation. Here we have an anthropomorphic two-faced lithic statue meant to represent a Celtic Gaulish god who's found in France. Here's a reproduction of a witch's altar based on objects found buried in a hearth in a cottage in Essex County in England. And finally, an idol with an accompanying magic circle that was found inscribed into stone at the temple site near where this idol, also known as a colossus in Greek mythology, was found. So looking at all of these, can you think of like what weird or interesting thing they all have in common? Anthropomorphism, humans. What else? Anything else? They're cursed, clearly. So those aren't wrong, but the real underlying thing is that they're all made up completely by me. I tricked you. I agree, it is hilarious. So, I know. So each of these stories did contain grains of truth, but like I piled those together to make a giant beach of lies. So when I was illustrating the book, I did actually illustrate some actual magical objects that existed, but many, such as these, I was given the principles of it and then actually asked to make up a new kind of avatar or simulacrum of the idea to illustrate the principles of these magical objects. So they're all based on real magical items that do exist. There are colossus, there are witch poppets and such. But these particular ones are made up by me. So, but this kind of begs the question, what if the stories or the illustrations of certain magical objects that we know of what if they're purely mythological? What if the thing doesn't actually exist? And if so, where did it come from? Or maybe it does exist in some form, but it doesn't do what we are saying that it does. So I'm really, really sorry I lied to you. Not really sorry, but I want you to be able to believe me and trust me. So as I go into the next, this object with a interesting and possibly dubious history, I raise my hand in oath. And I will not tell you, I swear I will not tell you made up facts about the Hand of Glory. So Hand of Glory has shown up in a lot of popular modern mythology. You might have seen it in The Wicker Man and a show called Lost Girl. And there's even a desiccated dead man's hand in the Harry Potter movie. But there's one particular story of note that features a Hand of Glory. And it takes place in England, 1797, at an inn, where one night everyone goes to sleep except a maid. Maid witnesses an intruder, comes in, has a dried severed hand that's also a candle, and proceeds to light all the fingers, except one finger will not light. So the intruder goes and gets his band of outlaws, brings them in order to rob the inn. The maid, still being awake unexpectedly, shoves them out, bars the door, tries to rouse everyone in the inn, but cannot wake anyone up. So she goes to extinguish the Hand of Glory. Water won't put it out. She tries ale. That doesn't work. Eventually, she tries milk, and that puts it out. Everyone in the inn wakes up, and they're able to drive off the thieves, or in some stories, they catch them and hang them. So how do you make a Hand of Glory? It's a complicated process in which you find a criminal that has been hung for his crimes. While he's still on the gallows, at midnight, on a moonless night, you cut off his right hand. It's definitely his right hand. It's always the right hand, except in this one other story where it's the left hand. And except in this other story where if he's a murderer, you cut off whichever hand did the deed. Anyway, so you cut off a hand, definitely. It's definitely a hand. So you wrap it in a burial shroud and you squeeze it to drain the blood. Any old burial shroud will actually do. You powder it with saltpeter, long pepper, and salt in earthenware until it's dry, or a fortnight, whichever comes first. And then you expose it to the sun in the dog days, or if this isn't convenient, you can also dry it out in an oven with herbs. The microwave is not recommended because it makes it chewy. So next, you make a candle, and you dip it in virgin wax, and you use fat from the criminal, the tallow, to make into a candle, and throw in a little horse dung for good measure. And there you have your Hand of Glory. You can also, in some cases, they use the wax and the fat, they make a candle, and then they place it in the hand. So in the later heyday of the Hand of Glory, it was most often used by thieves to break into homes. The hand, when it was lit, would put everybody into a deep coma-like sleep, or anyone who encountered it would also go to sleep. And each finger can sometimes represent everyone in the house. So like in our story, if a finger doesn't light, somebody is not going to sleep. The other tales say that the hand, when lit as a candle, will cast a light that only the intruder can see. So it's essentially giving your thief night vision. The hand is also said to unlock doors. It can only be extinguished by milk. And finally, the hand is also purported to be able to raise the dead temporarily. The dead come back to life, are reanimated for the duration in which the hand is lit until basically the candle burns all the way down. Oftentimes, the dead were reanimated to, ask them how they died or try to find the murderer. This works on two main principles of sympathetic magic. We have homeopathic magic, in which like attracts like. So the idea is that the hand is cut from a dead man, so it induces a state much like death, a deep sleep. And then we have contagious magic, where two things once in contact maintain a connection. So essentially, severed body parts still have the properties of their former owner. So you cut off the hand of a criminal, and it'll make you good at crime. Sounds legit. Yeah, that's science. So does one actually exist, though? We have all these stories, we have these illustrations. There's one known specimen at the Whitby Museum in England It was discovered by Joseph Ford in 1935, so not that long ago, and he immediately identified it's definitely a hand of glory. Super exciting. The stories of hand of glory at that time were really popular all throughout Eastern and Western Europe. So to find the hand of glory, at least this one, was legitimately used as a scribe. We're going to travel backward through the history and examine the origins of this object. Story of the hand is told many times in books studying witchcraft. We have the famous Golden Bough and Curious Myths of the Middle Ages, and these are both the late 1800s. How to make the hand of glory, our aforementioned recipe, is outlined in a few magical grimoires. We have the famous Petit Albert, so we're back at 1722 now. Mentioning the hand before all this, though, was actually in manuals on how to hunt witches. We have our Compendium Maleficarum. This is in 1608. It describes the recipe, but if we want to look for the earliest textual mention, we turn to Martin del Rio. He was a Jesuit theologian and self-described witch expert. I couldn't find a picture of him online, so I Googled Witch Finder to find an example of what he definitely did not look like. He was not this cool. So he wrote a 6-volume text on how to hunt witches, Disquisitiones Magicae, or Magical Investigations, in 1599. It was a bestseller among witch hunters, and it was actually reprinted many times up until about 1734. So he learned of the hand of glory through word of mouth. And even then, that story originated from witches, supposed witches, being extracted under torture. So Del Rio was thought of as the foremost expert on witches, and later it came to be that he knew absolutely nothing about what he was talking about. A bunch of his stories and facts about witches, he did his own research. They were proven false, and a lot of his stories were fabricated, and it turned out he actually self-admitted he had no experience with witches. He had never actually encountered even a purported witch. So he didn't make up the story of the Hand of Glory, though. Later works trace those earliest stories to several specific witches being tortured, and these are around 1590, so this is shortly before. And so later 16th century, Hand of Glory stories proliferating, extracted under torture by religious fanatics of dubious scholarly background. But as we see in this time, it's not so much thieves using it, it's witches, and they're using it in witches' rituals. Here in this text, it's mentioned as a fixture on the witch's mantle, up which the witches would fly up through the chimney during the witches' Sabbath. Around the origins of the myth, we have a painter, Franz Franken, creating images of the witches' Sabbath, and every single one of them has a Hand of Glory in it. So it's already well established this is a part of witches' rituals. Here's even more. So witches' rituals were often known to involve flying ointments with psychoactive ingredients. Here's where things get even more interesting, the etymological origin of the Hand of Glory. It was originally called the Main de Gloire, meaning Hand of Glory, but it turns out that is a folk etymological corruption of mandragore, also known as the mandrake roots. So now we're starting to see some more connections. The mandrake was already a popular item used in the occult because of its anthropomorphically shaped roots, and probably even more so because of its deliriant hallucinogenic tropine alkaloids. So science, getting high through science. So the earliest mentions of the Main de Gloire go on to describe actually a mandrake root, not a severed hand. The mandrake is described to shineth altogether by a light, so thieves' light. It's also known in some regions as the little gallows man because it was purported to grow from the seed of a man hung on the gallows. Think what you want of seed, they probably meant urine. So in this way, the hanged criminal, whether it's through a mandrake growing beneath his site of death or his hand being cut off, they enjoy a sort of existence beyond death, their skills or their predilections in life used by sympathetic magic by another. So the mandrake is also said to be used in witches' rituals and flying ointments because of its effects. The use of the mandrake can be traced back to ancient Babylon. There is actually a text that describes a recipe called cow's eye because of the dilation effect that it has on the pupil. So the mandrake, we can see where maybe it gave someone a bit of night vision. Burning it like you would a hand of glory, it's a less effective, but still effective way of enjoying its psychotropic effects. But who knows, maybe burning it helped you strike the balance between having dilated pupils and still being productive enough to rob a house while tripping balls. I don't know. It's also the most heavily used narcotic and soporific of the time, and in ancient times and the medieval era. So in this case, the hand of glory was something you would administer to others, putting everyone in the house into a coma-like sleep instead of ingesting yourself. This was the illustration of actually a woman drake that I did because, representation, for the effigy book, including elements of the flowers and then its different uses. It was often used, obviously, for death or sleep, but also for fertility and love-binding spells. So back to that Whitby Museum's hand. Is it a hand of glory? Does the hand of glory actually exist? Well, dead man's hands, or desiccated, severed hands of criminals, are actually a common artifact used in magic rituals. Whether they work, what they do, who knows. But this hand, while dried in the usual fashion, was shown no evidence of being prepared or used as a candle. So Ford might have been a little bit hasty in his identification, but this does become a powerful embodiment of the stories of the time. Ford reports that he actually grew up with stories of the hand of glory and how the previous generation lived in fear of this magical talisman being used on them. So magic and witchcraft, whether or not you believe in them, they've had an incredible effect on our culture and our way of seeing the world all around the world since time immemorial. The hand's story being continuously resurrected throughout history is a testament to that. So I will leave you with my own personal take on the hand of glory for the book. I warn you, it is a result of a predilection for heavy music, and they gave me a ton of artistic license. So.